Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of History's Greatest Battles. You know, it's not often that we're able to experience two titans of the battlefield engage in warfare against each other. It's something we haven't seen, arguably, since Wellington and Bonaparte, and prior to that, for nearly 2 millennia, which is the focus of our battle today. Of Scipio, Polybius said in his Histories, quote, "A general to whom nothing seemed impossible. Scipio handled the sword and the toga with equal skill, and while his tactics defeated armies, his temperance and wisdom conquered hearts," end quote. Of Hannibal, Livy said, quote, "No man in the world can equal Hannibal in skill or daring. Against him neither night nor day, winter nor summer, nor any other season made a difference," end quote. Let's now experience the Battle of Zama.
Welcome to History's Greatest Battles, Season 1, Episode 67, The Battle of Zama, 202 BC. Roman forces, roughly 24,000 infantry and 9,000 cavalry. Carthaginian forces, roughly 45,000 infantry and 3,000 cavalry. With Rome's triumph at Zama, the Second Punic War came to a decisive close, sealing Rome's ascendance as the unchallenged power of the Western Mediterranean. Carthage, once a formidable rival, was left broken and stripped of strength, her influence reduced to a shadow of its former might.
In 218 BC, the Second Punic War erupted into brutal, open conflict. Hannibal Barca, Carthage's daring commander stationed in Spain, struck at the very core of Roman pride the year before, brazenly besieging the city of Saguntum, a defiant act of war. The treaties forged at the end of the First Punic War marked Saguntum as Carthaginian territory, yet its government's allegiance to Rome was an offense too great for the Republic to overlook. Rome's answer to this slight was swift and unforgiving, a declaration of war. Hannibal seized Saguntum and then unleashed one of history's most audacious maneuvers. His forces surged across the Pyrenees, carved a path through the hostile lands of southern Gaul, and braved the unforgiving Alps, bearing down on northern Italy like an unstoppable storm. The thunder of Hannibal's arrival in the Po River Valley sent shockwaves through the Roman Senate, forcing them to scrap their carefully laid plans to strike at Carthage in Spain. Consul Publius Cornelius Scipio raced across the sea to Massilia, intending to intercept Hannibal. But Hannibal had moved with lethal speed, and Scipio, now outmaneuvered, marched his legions along the Italian coast to confront the invader directly. Simultaneously, Gnaeus Cornelius Scipio, his brother, sailed into Spain's northern coast. Landing north of the Ebro River, he drove deep into enemy territory and crushed Hanno, Hannibal's brother, securing a vital foothold for Rome in Spain. In Italy, Publius Scipio found himself unable to halt Hannibal's advance. Reassigned to Spain, he joined his brother Gnaeus in a grueling campaign against the Carthaginian forces, but in 211, both fell under the blade of Hasdrubal, another of Hannibal's fiercely loyal brothers. The Roman Senate, desperate for victory amidst their blood-drenched struggle, turned to a young but proven warrior, Publius Cornelius Scipio, son of the fallen consul. At only 25, he was given command of Rome's campaign in Spain. Bearing his father's name and legacy, the young Scipio inspired a fierce respect amongst his men. He plunged into battle, marking the beginning of a legendary career unmarred by defeat. In 209, Scipio struck, reclaiming the lands between the Ebro and the Pyrenees, and stamping Roman control onto the region once more. In a daring assault that tested the limits of caution, Scipio sailed down Spain's eastern coast with 27,000 men and stormed New Carthage, Carthage's stronghold in Spain. Victory there was decisive, and he claimed the heart of Carthaginian Spain. With New Carthage under his control, Scipio now wielded the power to sever Carthage's lifeline to its Spanish armies. Hasdrubal, forced into action, gathered his forces to confront the imminent threat. In 208, the cache at Baecula saw both armies locked in a ferocious battle, but with no clear victor. Hasdrubal withdrew, slipping north to retrace the path his brother had blazed into Italy a decade before. Scipio held his ground, letting Hasdrubal slip away. He turned his sights instead on the Carthaginian forces under Mago and Hasdrubal Gisco, determined to erase their presence from Spain. At Alipa in 206, Scipio delivered a crushing blow. His 48,000 men tore through an enemy force of 70,000, securing his supremacy in Spain and forcing Carthaginian retreat. With Spain firmly under his boot, Scipio reigned supreme, and when Hasdrubal Barca fell at the Metaurus, Hannibal was left stranded and alone in Italy, his lifeline severed. Now eyeing North Africa, Scipio crafted a daring strategy. He journeyed in secret to Numidia, seeking alliances with its two leaders, Syphax and Massinissa, whose loyalty could tilt the war's outcome. Scipio secured an alliance with Massinissa, a warrior as fierce as he was ambitious, while Syphax cast his lot with Carthage, setting the stage for total conflict. The Senate called him back to Rome to receive laurels and bask in his conquests. Yet Scipio's mind burned with a single aim: to bring the war to Carthage's doorstep. Elder statesmen and generals, their pride stung by the brilliance of Scipio's rise, grudgingly offered him command over Sicily, a half-hearted reward to box him away from further glories. Rome's grip on Sicily had held firm since the First Punic War, save for the kingdom of Syracuse, which retained its independence until the tides of war could call it to choose a side. In 213 BC, Syracuse threw its weight behind Carthage, provoking the full fury of Rome. The indomitable General Marcellus took up the siege, hammering at Syracuse's defenses for 2 relentless years until the city finally fell. Granting Scipio command of Sicily was less an honor than a thinly veiled exile. His forces were battered veterans, men who had tasted bitter defeat against Hannibal's unstoppable legions. But Scipio, unbowed by the Senate's slight, whipped the defeated troops into shape and summoned fresh recruits. By 204, he stood ready to launch an invasion of Africa with or without Rome's approval. Rome's command of the Mediterranean waves paved Scipio's path. In 204 BC, he led a force of 30,000 men across the sea into North Africa, where he laid siege to the city of Utica with a ruthless determination. Yet the arrival of Hasdrubal Gisco and the Numidian chieftain Syphax forced Scipio to abandon the siege. For the moment, the city would remain out of his grasp. Scipio set up a fortified camp along the coast, a position that, to his foes, must have appeared vulnerable and ripe for attack. Sensing an opportunity, Hasdrubal proposed terms of peace. Appearing open to negotiation, Scipio listened keenly, though his true intentions lay concealed behind a strategic calm. Unbeknownst to them, Scipio was crafting a deadly trap. While his enemies spoke of peace, he quietly laid plans to launch a surprise attack on their camps. Under the cover of night, Scipio unleashed his forces upon Hasdrubal's camp, while his Numidian ally, Massinissa, struck Syphax's camp with merciless precision. The assault left the Carthaginian army in ruins. Their camps erupted in flames, trapping men in a ring of fire. Nearly 40,000 men perished in the inferno as they tried to flee. Another 5,000 were seized as prisoners. The Carthaginian commanders managed to escape, but abandoned the shattered remains of their army. With his foes crushed, Scipio returned to lay siege to Utica once more. In stunned disbelief at the disaster, the Carthaginian Senate sent a fateful command across the Mediterranean. Hannibal, after 16 relentless years in Italy, was to return and defend his homeland. Thus, Scipio's primary aim was achieved. He had dragged the war from Italy's doorstep and onto Carthaginian soil. Obeying the summons, Hannibal gathered the weary yet battle-hardened force of roughly 15 to 20,000 men and embarked for Carthage on the 23rd of June, 203 BC. With their finest commander finally at their side, Carthage's resolve was renewed. They spurned Scipio's generous peace terms, choosing defiance over diplomacy. Infuriated by Carthage's insolence, Scipio marched up the coast, leaving every village in flames as he advanced toward the heart of Carthage. This trail of scorched earth forced the Carthaginian rulers to prod Hannibal into immediate action despite his caution. Hannibal hesitated, knowing his forces were divided between veterans, hardened but weary from years of war in Italy, and raw recruits, untested and scarcely ready for battle. Aware that Scipio's cavalry vastly outnumbered his own, Hannibal nonetheless marched from Carthage, but sent word to Scipio seeking a final attempt at negotiation. They met near Zama, only 5 miles from Carthage. There, Hannibal proposed generous terms, offering Rome dominion over all lands beyond Africa, but Scipio, steeled by past betrayals, refused to gamble on Carthaginian vows. Now resigned to battle, Hannibal marshaled his forces. He arranged them in 3 lines. The first, a front of fierce Gauls from both southern France and Liguria. The second line held his less seasoned soldiers, newly conscripted Carthaginians and local tribes. His final line was reserved for his most loyal and battle-scarred veterans. Hannibal positioned his Carthaginian cavalry to the right, with Syphax's Numidian horsemen on his left, and stationed his war elephants, a fearsome wall of beasts, along the front. In total, his army stood at around 45,000 infantry and 3,000 cavalry, ready to engage. Across the field, Scipio arrayed his 34,000 infantry in 3 lines, though he discarded the standard Roman formation in favor of a bolder, calculated setup. Each Roman company, or maniple, numbering 120 to 180 men, usually deployed in a staggered formation. But Scipio chose to line them in columns this day, revealing a mind finely attuned to the rigors of this field. In his first line stood the Hastati, young veterans whose courage was matched by raw strength. Behind them, he stationed the Principes, seasoned warriors hardened by years of bloodshed. And in the last line were his Triarii, the elder statesmen of his army, men unshakable and ready to end the fight. Scipio set his Velites, swift-footed young soldiers armed as light infantry, in the gaps between the columns, prepared to strike or divert as the battle's tides demanded. With his forces arrayed in columns, Scipio created channels through which Hannibal's rampaging elephants could charge harmlessly, reducing the threat they posed. Scipio, too, flanked his army with cavalry, fielding a formidable 9,000. Massinissa commanded the Numidian horse on the right, squaring off against Hannibal's Numidians, while Laelius held the Roman cavalry on the left. Hannibal launched the first strike, driving his war elephants forward, their massive frames crashing toward Roman lines. But Scipio's soldiers blasted their trumpets, and the elephants on Hannibal's left wing faltered, panicking. They turned wildly into the Numidian cavalry, scattering the horses into chaos and total disarray. Seizing the moment, Massinissa hurled his cavalry into the confusion. Plunging into the tangled Numidian lines, he chased them mercilessly, driving them entirely off the battlefield. Laelius struck next, slamming into the Carthaginian cavalry raw and untested in the heat of true battle. They buckled under the force, scattering, as Laelius's men tore through, pressing them into a frantic retreat. Amidst the chaos of fleeing cavalry, the disciplined infantry formations of both armies advanced, moving inexorably toward the clash that would decide their fates. Hannibal's forces held a numerical edge, a strength that should have secured their victory. Yet as the fighting dissolved into brutal close-quarter clashes, his first line found itself fighting alone. The second line inexplicably held back, leaving the front unsupported and vulnerable. Feeling betrayed and cut off, Hannibal's frontline troops broke ranks and attempted to retreat, but the soldiers in the second line, steadfast and unmoving, blocked their path, turning what had been a disciplined formation into an eruption of chaos. Confusion gave way to infighting among the Carthaginians, their ranks collapsing as Scipio's young Hastati drove forward, pressing the fractured Carthaginian lines to the breaking point. As Scipio's Principes surged forward to reinforce the attack, Hannibal's second line cracked, spilling into the third line, which stubbornly held its ground and refused them passage. The Carthaginian formation devolved into chaos, soldiers pressing against their own lines, trapped and desperate. The field became a slaughterhouse, littered with Carthaginian dead and wounded as confusion and disorder consumed Hannibal's once formidable ranks. Scipio's triarii, the Roman army's most seasoned and resolute veterans, surged forward to join the fray. The Romans, their lines unwavering, launched a devastatingly coordinated assault on their disoriented foes. The Carthaginian third line, stalwart and determined, braced themselves and fought with unwavering resolve, yet by now they were vastly outnumbered and encircled. Despite their dwindling numbers, Hannibal's infantry met the Roman advance with skill and ferocity, keeping the outcome uncertain as the battle raged on. But the decisive blow came from behind. The Roman and Numidian cavalry, their pursuits complete, circled back onto the battlefield, crashing into the exposed Carthaginian rear. The Carthaginian ranks finally shattered under this two-pronged assault. The Romans unleashed a merciless slaughter, suffering 1,500 dead and 4,000 wounded, while the Carthaginians lost 20,000 men, with another 15,000 taken prisoner. Though his army was decimated, Hannibal escaped the bloodbath with only a handful of loyal retainers. Scipio resisted the temptation to besiege Carthage itself, a city of immense fortifications, lying at the edge of a fortified peninsula. His forces simply were not equipped with the siege engines or supplies required for such a task. Mindful, too, of Roman politics, Scipio knew he might be recalled before a siege concluded. Allowing another to claim Carthage's final submission was not a fate he would accept. In the end, Scipio extended a peace, true to Roman custom, of tempered mercy. He demanded Carthage surrender all but 10 of its ships and relinquish every war elephant, agree to wage no war without Rome's permission, recognize Massinissa as the rightful king of Numidia, and pay an indemnity of 10,000 silver talents, nearly 500,000 pounds of silver. In truth, these terms were lenient. Rome, in her might, could have seized Carthage's entire merchant fleet, and with it dominion over its vast trading empire. Despite his defeat at Zama, Hannibal's reputation endured, and he was appointed to lead Carthage's newly organized government. Under his prudent guidance, Carthage paid off its indemnity swiftly, recovering remarkably from the ashes of the long and devastating war. Yet Hannibal's enduring influence stirred Roman jealousy, and after 196 BC, he lived in exile, offering his military genius to foreign courts until, cornered by Rome's relentless pursuit, he took his own life rather than submit. Hannibal's Italian campaign stands as a towering masterpiece of military genius. Yet ultimately he was ensnared by the very success that had brought Rome to its knees. Scipio was crowned in triumph and earned the title Africanus, forever marking his legacy as the man who bested Hannibal. Their clash at Zama was a rare and fateful meeting of the age's finest minds in war, a dual strategy not matched until Wellington would meet Napoleon centuries later at Waterloo. For 50 years, Rome and Carthage held an uneasy peace, but when Massinissa's hunger for land encroached too boldly on Carthaginian borders, Carthage rose to answer, sparking renewed conflict in 151 BC. Carthage's act, committed without Rome's blessing, stirred the Republic's wrath, and Rome unleashed its armies once more. Carthage swiftly offered to lay down arms, but refused defiantly to surrender their capital. Following a relentless 3-year siege, Rome crushed Carthage in 146 BC, reducing the once grand city to ashes. Utica rose as the new provincial capital, and the survivors found themselves under Rome's unyielding dominion. Rome's conquest secured control over the fertile North African plains, ensuring a steady flow of grain that would sustain the empire for generations. Zama's victory propelled Rome from a regional force to an international power, with Spain, Sicily, Cisalpine Gaul, Corsica, and Sardinia already under her sway. Rome now held dominion over the entire western Mediterranean, her power stretching from shore to shore. Though Rome already ruled an empire in all but name, It would not be formally declared until Augustus rose to power in 31 BC. Rome's supremacy grew unchallenged. By 168 BC, her victory over Macedonia at Pydna sealed her dominance, leaving nearly the entire Mediterranean under Roman influence. The triumph at Zama was the fulcrum upon which the Roman Empire rose. Had Hannibal seized victory that day, Carthage might have prolonged the war, changing history's course forever. Despite Carthage's notoriously stingy support, a victorious Hannibal returning from Africa might have threatened Rome itself, his formidable army at his back. The city's capture, a chilling possibility. A Carthaginian empire over Europe remained speculative, yet control over Spain would have surely returned to Hannibal's hands, reshaping the ancient balance of power. Such a victory could have set the stage for a fierce rivalry over Gaul, perhaps even changing the future of Western Europe, a land shaped by Phoenician roots from Carthage, rather than the classical legacy of Rome.